Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep today into youth sports. Um, Specifically, we're going to try to figure out why injuries are spiking. Even though young athletes look, well, they seem strong and faster than ever before.
Yeah, it's a real paradox.
We are going to use this article to kind of guide us through this. It's called Top Reasons That Injuries Have Increased in Youth Athletics and How to Improve Injury Prevention. And it is jam-packed with some pretty thought-provoking stuff. Like, one of the first things that really jumped out at me was that in Canada, like, 1 in 5 kids get a sports injury every year.
Wow. That is a lot. Really
Yeah,
makes you
yeah.
think, like what's going on here? Are we doing something wrong? Are we missing something?
Well, yeah, and to add to that, the article brought up this report from 2009, and it had some pretty startling numbers. It said there were over 20,000 hockey injuries, 170,000 basketball
Like,
injuries,
wow.
and hold on, 215,000 football injuries.
That's incredible.
And this is just for kids between 5 and 14.
And just in the US, right?
Yeah, just in U.S. emergency rooms. I mean, think about how many more injuries there must be that don't even get reported.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the numbers aren't really going down either, right? So it's clearly something we need to figure out.
Absolutely. And one of the things that this article suggests is that these young athletes, even though they might look stronger and faster on the surface, they might actually be weaker.
Weaker.
Yeah, like fundamentally weaker, like they lack a certain kind of strength. The author even mentions that they've worked with a lot of high-level youth athletes, and almost all of them had a history of pretty serious injuries.
Hmm. So are we saying they look strong, but they're not actually strong?
That seems to be what the article is suggesting. Like the author even says that a lot of these kids can't even do 20 push-ups or like a single chin-up.
Seriously.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking, right?
It is. So maybe we're just too focused on speed and power,
Mm.
you know? Like
Yeah.
we're not building that base level of strength.
Yeah, exactly. The article argues that that's a huge part of the problem. And, they even suggest that maybe there should be some kind of strength standard.
Strength standards.
Yeah, like maybe kids should have to be able to do a certain number of push-ups or chin-ups to be on a team, to be allowed to participate.
Hmm. I see. So that would shift the focus away
Exactly.
from just like specialized skills and put more emphasis on that underlying strength.
Exactly. And the article talks about another big factor that's contributing to injuries. It's this idea of restricted range of motion.
Restricted range of motion. What does that mean?
So imagine an elastic band. If you keep stretching it and stretching it, eventually it's going to snap, right?
Yeah, I get that.
Well, the article says that the same thing can happen to tendons and ligaments if they aren't trained through their full range of motion.
Oh, okay. I see.
So if a muscle and its connective tissues are constantly in a shortened position, like they're never fully extended, they become less resilient and more prone to tearing and straining.
That makes sense. So what kind of exercises are we talking about here?
Well, the article mentions things like half squats and quarter squats. Like those are really popular.
Yeah, very popular.
But they're actually contributing to this problem because you're not going through a full range of motion.
Ah, I see.
And the article says that years of doing these shortened movements can lead to muscles that are stiff and shortened, and that actually ends up reducing athleticism.
So you're less athletic.
Exactly, in the long run, yeah.
Yeah.
There's this saying in the article, you can't fall safely if you can't bend.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that powerful?
That's a great analogy.
And the article highlights a quote from these Russian sports scientists. It says, all of this has a negative effect on muscle elasticity and an unfavorable effect on speed, strength, and precise movement coordination.
Oh, wow. So it's like you're strong, but you can't actually use that strength effectively.
Right. It's like having a powerful engine but faulty brakes.
Exactly. Makes
Right.
a lot of sense.
So another thing that the article talks about is bracing and taping and how that might be playing a role in all of this.
Oh, interesting. What are they saying about that?
The author has this really great phrase, it's all connected.
It's all connected. Yeah, you can't isolate anything.
Right.
Everything affects everything else.
Exactly.
So what are they saying about bracing and taping?
They're basically saying that when we brace or tape a joint, we might think we're protecting it.
Yeah, that's what you think, right?
But we could actually be messing with its natural ability to move and to give feedback to the brain.
Oh, so like The brain needs to know what the joint is doing to
Exactly.
be able to control it properly.
And if you restrict that movement, it could actually make the athlete more likely to get injured, especially in sports where there are a lot of like unpredictable movements.
That makes sense. It's like if your brain doesn't know what your ankle is doing, it can't tell your muscles how to react to keep you stable.
Exactly. I'm actually really curious about this idea of the brain knowing what the body is doing. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's this thing called proprioception.
Proprioception.
It's essentially your body's awareness of where it is in space. And it's really crucial for coordination and balance and all of those
This
things.
is like a sixth sense almost.
Yeah, you could say that. It's like an internal GPS for your body.
That's fascinating. So, if we're always bracing or taping a joint, are we preventing that sense from developing properly?
Yeah, that's the concern. It's like we're creating a dependency on external support instead of letting the body develop its own internal awareness.
It's like we're putting a cast on a healthy limb.
Yeah. And in the long run, that could be, well, that could really backfire. It could make the athlete more vulnerable to injuries later on.
Wow. This is giving me a whole new perspective on youth sports, and we're just getting started.
I know, right? There's so much more to unpack here. I'm really excited to dive deeper into this.
Me too. Got a lot more to talk about.
You know, it's interesting how the article really emphasizes this, like this idea that when we focus so much on things like speed and power,
Yeah.
we might actually be creating athletes who are really strong, but like only in a very specific way.
Right.
And they might not have that kind of overall resilience that they need to really thrive.
Yeah, like they're strong, but they're not tough.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's not just about the muscles, it's about the tendons and ligaments and the nervous system.
Right. It's like the whole system has to be strong.
Yeah. And what I really like about this article is that it encourages us to think about all these other factors, you know, like even things like taping an ankle or,
Yeah.
favoring certain exercises.
That's all connected.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, it makes you wonder, like, what kind of foundation are we building for these young athletes? Are we setting them up for long-term success?
Yeah.
Or are we just focused on, getting those quick results?
Right. And I think you brought up a good point earlier about the psychological component of all this.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's so much pressure on these kids these days
Yeah.
to specialize early, to train intensely.
For parents, from coaches,
From everywhere, social media even. It's like they're constantly being pushed to be better and better.
and to play through pain.
Oh, yeah. That's a huge problem. Like, it's almost seen as a badge of honor.
Yeah. Like, tough it out, no pain, no gain, all of that.
And, when you combine that kind of pressure with training methods that might not be appropriate for their age or their development.
It can be a recipe for disaster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about preventing physical injuries. It's about, fostering a healthy relationship with their sport.
Right. Like at the end of the day, if they're not enjoying it,
Yeah.
what's the point?
Exactly. So we've talked about some of the problems, but like, where do we go from here? What can we actually do about this?
Well, the article doesn't give us like a step-by-step solution,
Right.
but it definitely makes a strong case for a more holistic approach.
Okay.
Like a more developmentally sound approach to training.
I think it starts with asking the right questions, right?
Yeah.
Like, are we prioritizing performance over health? Are we sacrificing long-term development for short-term gains?
Yeah.
Are we really creating a culture that supports these young athletes?
Exactly. And, those are questions that we need to be asking ourselves constantly.
Yeah.
And the answers are going to be different for every athlete, for every sport, for
Right.
every coaching environment.
But just asking the questions is a good first step.
Absolutely. It gets the conversation started.
So we've talked about the problems, but what does a more positive approach actually look like?
Well, the article talks about a few key things. Like, first of all, it emphasizes the importance of building that solid foundation that we talked about.
Okay.
Strength, flexibility,
Okay.
mobility.
Right. So not just building bigger muscles.
Yeah, it's about training movements, not just muscles.
Okay. And you mentioned proprioception earlier.
Yeah.
Like, how can we incorporate that into training to help prevent injuries?
That's a great question. There are actually a lot of exercises and drills that can help improve proprioception.
Oh,
Things like balance training, agility drills,
okay.
even just practicing movements with your eyes closed.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's all about helping the athlete develop a better sense of where their body is in space.
So it's about, like, teaching them to be more aware of their bodies.
Exactly. It's about fostering that mind-body connection.
And so instead of relying on braces and tape all the time,
Right.
we should be focusing on strengthening that internal support system.
Yeah. That's the idea. I mean, obviously there are times when bracing or taping is necessary,
Right.
but it shouldn't be the default.
And the article also talks about like moving away from this one size fits all mentality, right? Like recognizing that every athlete is different.
Oh, absolutely. Each athlete has their own strengths, their own weaknesses, their own needs.
And so how do we create training programs that are really tailored to each individual?
It requires a more, well, a more thoughtful approach.
Okay.
Coaches need to really take the time to assess each athlete,
Okay.
to look at their training history,
Yeah.
any previous injuries, their physical development, their goals.
That makes sense. But in a team setting, can coaches really do that for every single player?
It's definitely a challenge,
Yeah.
but I think it's possible. It might require some creative solutions,
Like what?
like maybe breaking athletes into smaller groups
Oh, okay.
or incorporating some individualized elements into team practices.
So it's not just about changing the training methods, it's about changing the whole culture of youth sports.
Exactly. We need to shift from a culture that prioritizes winning at all costs
Yeah.
to one that values the well-being of the athlete.
And that's a big shift.
It is, but it starts with education. Coaches, parents, athletes, they all need to be informed about the risks and the benefits.
So it's about starting conversations, challenging assumptions,
Yeah,
empowering everyone to make informed decisions.
absolutely. It's not just about preventing injuries. It's about setting these kids up for a lifetime of healthy movement.
I love that. So we've covered a lot, but this is really just the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
It's time to take what we've learned and actually do something with it.
That's what matters.
Wow, it's amazing how much we've like unpacked already just from this one article.
I know, right?
It's a lot to think about.
We've gone from those crazy injury stats
Yeah.
to like foundational strength and range of motion and even the
The
brain.
brain, yeah. Proprioception.
It's mind-blowing, really.
It really is. And it seems like the big takeaway here is that we can't just focus on one thing.
Right.
It's about changing our whole approach
Yeah.
to youth sports, like moving away from this idea that there's like one right way to train everyone.
The one-size-fits-all thing.
Exactly. We need to be more individualized.
A more holistic approach.
Yeah, a paradigm shift on it.
Paradigm shift. I like that. That's what it is.
So it's like we need to completely rethink how we're approaching this.
Yeah. And this article gives us a good starting point,
Right.
Like it's about building that foundation like we talked about.
The strength, the flexibility.
Yeah, and mobility.
Mm,
Training movements, not just muscles.
right.
And it's about, understanding the body as a system.
Yeah. And I think it's also about empowering the athletes themselves,
Absolutely.
like giving them a voice in their own development.
They need to understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Right, like what the risks are.
What the risks are.
How to listen to their bodies.
Yeah, and to feel comfortable speaking up if something doesn't feel right.
Exactly. And it's not just about the athletes, it's about, everyone who's involved in youth sports,
The parents, the coaches,
the medical professionals,
everyone needs to be on the same page.
working together to create this environment where these kids can thrive.
Yeah, a safe and supportive environment.
Where they can enjoy their sports.
And where they can reach their full potential without, sacrificing their health.
That's a really beautiful way to put it.
And it's not just an ideal, There are people out there who are doing this.
Oh, yeah.
There are coaches and organizations who are taking this approach.
And they're seeing amazing results.
Exactly. It's just about shifting our priorities.
Yeah. And realizing that winning isn't everything.
Right. Winning is great, but it's not the only thing that matters.
Exactly. So this deep dive has really gotten me thinking about all the pressure that these kids are under.
A lot.
Like how do we create a culture where long-term development is actually valued?
Yeah, where it's not all about the short-term gains.
It's a big question.
It is a big question,
Mm-hmm.
but we got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. And maybe it starts with asking those tough questions. Like, are we pushing them too hard? Are we teaching them to ignore pain? Are we putting too much emphasis on winning?
We have to be honest with ourselves.
And we have to be willing to challenge the status quo.
That's how change happens.
So I feel like we've just scratched the surface here.
We have. This is a huge topic.
But it's a really important one. So what advice would you give to listeners who want to keep learning about this?
I would say keep exploring. There are so many resources out there.
Yeah.
There are books, articles, websites, organizations.
Experts to talk to?
Find the people who are doing this right and learn from them.
And share what you learn with others.
Exactly. Spread the word. Talk to your kids' coaches. Talk to other parents.
Be an advocate.
Be an advocate. That's what it takes to create change.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, I think so too.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have, from the problems
To the potential solutions,
and to a vision for a healthier future for young athletes.
and it's a vision that I think we can all get behind.
I hope so.
So to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone,
We hope you've learned something new.
and that you're inspired to make a difference.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep advocating for a healthier and happier future for young athletes.
That's what it's all about.